Ellen. We're going to make corrections now. Here's all the things that were said earlier that were wrong. Wow, I knew it. That often works the trick. We need to make sure that people understand Atlanta has spent a great deal more money in total than was referred to in the prior panel. We are at $4 billion. That's billion with a B, as in boy, as in big bucks, on the sewer changes. Sally Bethea is getting her eyebrows up, but we've got two members of the Atlanta City Council here. Let's see both of you. Madam Adrian from Buckhead, and I think I saw, good morning, $4 billion. And I also think I saw my former school board member, now current at-large member of the City Council here. There he is, Mr. Watson in the back, but he's talking to the girl sitting next to him. This really is kindergarten, yes! Okay, panel number 2. We had asked this group to tell us what's next and steps toward a sustainable future. But I've got to make a personal note here. All 4 of these people I know well. One of them actually helps to sign my paycheck. Bob Kerr is the chair of the South Fork Conservancy, where I serve as executive director. And together we are building a system of trails along the South Fork of Peachtree Creek, and doing it in a simple, sustainable way to link existing green spaces so people can see and learn to love the water that we have taken for granted.
There went my talk.
I don't think Bob Kerr will be at a loss for words. Sally Bethea and I have worked together as on opposite sides of the microphone for years. She and I know each other well, and I respect the work that she has done, which has helped make this a safer and more attractive region to live in. Mr. Thomas with IBM, you and the company you represent have helped make my typing better for a long, long time, and I'm very much looking forward to and appreciate the role you've had and your company has had in helping us have this forum this morning. And Wilton Rooks, you represent the best of cooperation and working together like adults to help people learn to do what we learned in kindergarten, which was share and respect other people's private property. Okay, let's start toward a sustainable future. Sally, why don't you kick us off?
So you want question 2, not question 1?
Let's...
Just curious.
Yes, let's question 1.
Instead
What are we doing now in Metro Atlanta that's working? And do you buy the $4 billion figure that the City Council is selling?
Wow, okay. Well, first of all, the $4 billion. Did you say million or billion?
I said billion.
Billion. $4 billion, of course, is the drinking water system. I mean, the sewers are half, and the drinking water system is about half, too. I think people tend to forget that the whole package is all of our pipes, not just taking the waste away, but also the drinking water, too, which is absolutely critical. So what are we doing for successes? That's
what are we doing now in Metro Atlanta that's working?
That's working,
Are you comfortable with that? Is that
Oh,
good?
I'm comfortable. Yeah, I'm totally comfortable. Well, first of all, Doug, you still here. Thank you very much for laying out everything with the Clean Water Atlanta program and the lawsuit. I think that it is a massive success. According to Shirley Franklin and now also Kasim Reed, some $18 billion worth of investment and construction has been allowed in downtown Atlanta because we fixed the pipes. So it's not just about the river, the streams that were filled with sewage and everything from your bathroom. We tend to forget 15 years ago. But we were also facing development moratoriums. And so it's a huge success. And I think everyone's working really well together. I appreciate Doug mentioning that we did have to jumpstart things. It's a good thing the Clean Water Act has that citizen supervision. Otherwise, I think we'd be fighting not just over how much water was heading downstream from Atlanta, but how clean it was. And the role of federal agencies in particular and nonprofits is really critical here. The state did come along eventually. On water quantity, I want to say what's working, creative conservation solutions, we're seeing them everywhere at the local level. We're not seeing what we would like to see in terms of investments, incentives from regional or state levels. But we're seeing the City of Atlanta's Care and Conserve program is really great. We hope that keeps going. DeKalb County, thank you, Retrofit on Reconnect, the only jurisdiction that's been able to do that and help us not just put low-flow plumbing in new facilities and new development, which there's not a whole lot of these days, unfortunately, but the inventory we have of old homes and buildings is critical. And
Hang
DeKalb
on.
is
Retrofit on Reconnect, everybody's
Right.
up to date? DeKalb County
But-
pays to help you replace your plumbing.
Right,
up to
when
date.
you buy a home. So that's a great success story there, and they had the wisdom to move forward. Cobb County, we also gave an award last year. They're working really well with the green industry. Douglas County has got some great things going, reuse, and Forsyth County. Last year we put together Filling the Water Gap. It's on our website at chattahoochee.org, talking about the conservation successes in the region, but also the missed opportunities. We'll be updating that soon. We have made a lot of progress in conservation in the last decade. We are not the national leader or a national leader yet, but I think we will be. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Thomas, you have a lot of good thoughts about this, and I know we'd love to hear a short version of what we are doing right.
Well, I think one of the first things that we're doing well with the City of Atlanta was implementing the enterprise asset management systems. When we did that back for the consent decree back in '99 when I first started with Williams, Russell, and Johnson, we had a lot of problems in terms of, again, not knowing where our assets were. And then now to the point where we're trying to move toward a more sustainable future, which means that we're going to go from the reactive stage more or less up now to the planned and going to predictive, so we can actually start predicting what is happening. One of the things I think is most important is trying to manage the stormwater that we have. This consent decree that's brought upon by the North Georgia Planning District, they require that we have a watershed plan. And that watershed plan was also going to include the stormwater. The requirement for the stormwater facilities and structures to be managed and inspected, and then again to repair those facilities. So now here we go, we're at the poo-poo plan, as you might say. And so now we're going to go ahead and make sure we have to manage those facilities and the assets associated with that. So when we started implementing the CMMS, what the city did as part of the consent decree, it started to ensure that we're going to have compliance with the NPDES permitting, as well as with the total maximum data load legislation. Again, as you continue to mature and you go to the predictive approach, when you start thinking about a stormwater, let's say you have, and I'd like to make a real-time scenario. We do have a significant rain event here in Atlanta. We can now use our computerized maintenance management system, or our CMMS, to go out and create work orders to go out and clean the debris from the street and from the catch basins prior to the rain event. That way we should eliminate the amount of pollution that we have that enter into our surface water systems. So that's why we're going to start using different things like technology, and the city is doing that right now. As we move toward the future, we're going to start taking advantage of more of the business analytics. Data is everywhere. We have the National Weather Service, and we also have one of the IBM research models, which is called Deep Thunder, which is a weather modeling and decision support system. We start predicting and knowing where we have the actual rain will come down. So if you know within the Deep Thunder system, it goes within a 1 square kilometer area, and you can predict exactly how much rain you will get there in that particular area. Now we're taking advantage of that information that we can integrate into the CMMS. So the capabilities are there now for the City of Atlanta to have even more integrated management information systems. That way, by having that information there, it starts with what we call our intelligent water management, as well as our smarter water information management. Everyone knows right now the best way to do things, they always say, is work smarter, not harder. Okay? So we're going to take this data, we're going to put that into various performance dashboards. It gives us an opportunity to more visually see what is going on within our systems. And using your geographic information systems, or your GIS, you start to see the layers, the topographic maps, and you see the layers that you have all everywhere. Now you can also combine that with your hydraulic model, and then now you're looking at your stormwater maps. You can look at the different locations where you have your various assets, be that your catch basins, be your sewers, be your manholes. Then when you have those things overlapping and you can see how the water is supposed to flow, the city now will be in a position to say, well, here's an area that with this low-lying area that we always is subject to flooding. So in that area, we may need to make some modifications or enhancements to our systems collection system. Do we need to add additional catch bases there to make sure that we don't have the areas where they have some more flooding? And by using that, we're going to empower the city, and that's going to go with the overall enterprise approach, and we call that analytics-driven asset management. We're going to use the data, let the data help us make the decisions that we need to make, so that later on when Ms. Bethea and I get ready to shoot the hooch, we want the people down in Columbus, where my father is from, as well as in Albany, we want them to be able to shoot the hooch and enjoy it just as much as we do here.
Good. Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Rooks, how do we get everybody to get in the same room and agree? The ACF stakeholders group is where Mr. Rooks comes from.
Okay, thank you very much, Sally. In order to sort of deal with these two questions, I need to step back just a little bit. If I could have slide number 7, I think, on the screen. In August 2008, a group of about 8 people sat around a conference room in LaGrange, Georgia, and said, "Gee, there's got to be a better way." After 20 years of litigation that looked like it was interminable, the 8 people said, "What would happen if a group of stakeholders got together and established a process whereby we could talk about and discuss and have dialogue and hopefully change minds regarding how the water in the ACF basin is being utilized?" That very early effort was really based on the premise that what was missing in the entire process up to that point were the stakeholders' input. So the question became, can the diverse users of the ACF basin, the water, ranging all the way from utilities to recreation to navigation to water quality, agriculture, and from all 3 states, Georgia, Florida, and Alabama, work together to cooperatively come up with a equitable sharing of the waters in the basin. So that was the underlying premise, and there was cautious optimism from that meeting that yes, we can do that. We didn't know how to do it, but we began the process anyway. If I can go to the next slide. What evolved from that was an organization that is very widely representative of the diverse users. Members range all the way from utilities to cities, chambers of commerce, agricultural users, oystermen in the Apalachicola, representatives from Alabama in the ecology area and in the cities, and industrial and power supply areas, environmental organizations like Upper Chattahoochee Riverkeeper, Florida Riverkeeper, Apalachicola Riverkeeper, Upper Chattahoochee, Flint Riverkeeper. All these organizations are actually trying to work together, and there was somewhat of an iconic moment in one of the meetings in Apalachicola where the watershed manager for the city of Atlanta was sitting next to an oysterman, and they were talking about what's good for the basin. They were not arguing about their own parochial interests, and that's been the underlying premise of the organization from the beginning. This is really the first time that a organization this diverse and representing the geography that is of the entire ACF basin has sat together and talked about issues and tried to come up with plans as to what's good for the basin. If I can go to the next slide. So we are currently engaged. We've proceeded from that question about could we work together to actually doing it. We have some very significant projects going now. One is the Sustainable Water Management Plan. We've engaged 2 world-class consulting firms to help us with the modeling and the in-stream flow assessment. Associated with that, we've had projects going with the Carl Vinson Institute for the best management practices in the basin. What are people doing now that other people can look at as an opportunity to improve their utilization of the water? We fundamentally believe that eventually there's got to be an institutional option for how do you manage a multi-state, multi-jurisdictional water resource like the ACF basin. Interestingly enough, about 4 years going to Civic League Forum, we had the executive director of the Delaware River Basin Council, which is an organization that manages 4 different the water interests of 4 different states along with the Corps of Engineers. That is becoming a focus in terms of exploring what the options are for that. We're also engaged in a very significant fundraising effort which is being supported by the City of Atlanta and the organizations in this area. So back to the first question, what are we doing now in Metro Atlanta that's working? Metro Atlanta has been very supportive of this effort. Numerous people in this audience have contributed time, energy, and money into the effort that's going on so far. In terms of the quest to do better and smarter, we are really one of the few and maybe the only organization that creates a forum for people to sit in the same room around the same table on an equal basis and talk about what's good for agriculture, power supply, utilities, business, water supply, and so forth. So it really is a forum for discussion of these issues, but more than discussing, one of the premises we put forward is we wanted to be a unified voice for the stakeholders. So now that we've got the voice, we're trying to figure out what to say. And that's the next challenge, and that's where the hard work comes in. So that's where we are today. We encourage anybody to join and become members. There's brochures on the table outside, so that's where we are right now.
Thank you, Mr. Rooks. Once the dog who has run after the school bus for 1,000,000 years catches the bus, what does he do with it? Once you've got your group assembled, what do you say? Mr. Kerr?
Since I signed her paycheck, I've been allowed to digress for a moment. How many of you think of George W. Bush as a conservationist? Raise your hands. None. Well, let me comment it. After I retired, I got active in a number of organizations, or more active. One is the Marine Conservation Biology Institute, which is an organization headquartered in Seattle, Washington, that deals with nothing but ocean issues. I've chaired that organization for the last 4 years, and we have looked at overfishing, bottom fishing, trawling, all of the acid acidification, coral reef destruction, the fact that over 90% of the big fish are now gone. And find that rather appalling, and one of the things came up with was set aside of large marine protected areas. We worked directly with the White House, George Bush, his wife, Council on Environmental Quality, and in his last days as president, he set aside, by executive decree, more area than any other president has ever set aside. The northwestern Hawaiian Islands, 1,200 miles long, territorial waters around that, parts of the Mariana Trench, some of the territorial waters in the South Pacific. Set those aside so that those highly productive areas could, in fact, become nurseries again to maybe solve some of these problems. Still working on that. Another organization that I'm involved with is Northland College in Wisconsin on the shores of Lake Superior. I'm on that board. The students there have Lake Superior and a national forest as their classroom, their outdoor classroom. And you have to be a special kind of student to want to go and live on the shores of Lake Superior in the winter. It's just unbelievable. But they're tackling some of the problems of Lake Superior. Pollution, unexplained decline in elevation, and exotic species which are disrupting the ecological value. So those are a couple of things where, while they don't affect us directly, indirectly they affect our quality of life, our food supply, etc. Third organization, as Sally has pointed out, is the South Fork Conservancy. And while that organization may not lead to increased water supply, it certainly has potential to lead to an improved quality of life and an ecological quality of the river system. What we're looking at there is the opportunity to restore over 31 miles of stream called South Fork Peachtree Creek and its tributaries. And importantly, we're also looking at the opportunity to connect a number of local parks and green spaces with low impact trails to allow people to get out of their houses, go walk along the creek, and enjoy the outdoors and begin to appreciate once again, perhaps, the quality of being next to nature in the city. So those are a couple of things that we're looking at. Where do we go from here? I think that everything has to be on the table. And everything has to be looked at from the lens of need, economy, ecological, etc. And certainly practicality. And as part of that need assessment, looking at the lens, through that lens, we need to have an understanding of what is the carrying capacity of the system in the metro Atlanta area. No one wants to talk about that subject, but the water from Lake Lanier, Allatoona, and so forth is relatively finite when you look at sustained yield. So what do we want to do? We have plenty of time now. Our population is not increasing as the way we thought it was going to, the economy doing what it's doing. So we need to look at those things. We need to look at wells. We need to look at new reservoirs. We need to look at rock quarries. We need to look at getting water from Tennessee. We need to be in negotiations constantly, as Pat Barmeyer pointed out, with our neighboring states, including Tennessee. So I think there's opportunities, even though we are, in fact, seeing worldwide serious degradation of the streams, oceans, etc. The fact is, I think we can be a model through the Southport Conservancy or how you can begin to address on a case-by-case, stream-by-stream basis the improvement in those things.
Thank you. Thoughtful, and we have lots of thoughtful questions. But
Sally,
from this positive base. Yes,
one
ma'am.
quick thing. I was a bad girl. I didn't understand the rules. Can I give you quickly my thoughts for the future? 4 points.
Well, that's where we're headed.
But that's where we're going.
That's
okay.
where we're headed.
Everybody else, I thought.
Now that we've all
Great.
set things up as terrific, let's see where
Okay.
we need to go for the future, which is
Right.
the underlying theme of there is where are we not so terrific, and what can we fix that will make the future better? Why don't you begin?
Okay, thank you. Really 4 points, I think, that I'd like to make. We really have got to have a shared pain vision, if I can speak of it that way. And I think what Wilton's talked about with the ACFS is really critical. He spent an amazing amount of time and effort trying to get everybody in the same room. But to get everyone to talk together, we've got to get rid of what I heard a bit with the first panel, with all due respect, which was a very Atlanta-centric, Georgia-centric. It's not our problem. It's these people downstream and their endangered species. We really need to understand there is a sharing of pain here. We all love, enjoy, and need to use this river basin that is so important. Atlanta is doing much better, certainly, on conservation. On a good day, I think we do return 65% of the water. On a bad month, in the summer of 2006, maybe half the water came back into the system. We're trying to get more water back. But it's not just an issue of Lake Lanier versus the Apalachicola River. There's a big river in between. There's the first national water trail is the Chattahoochee River National Recreation Area right below Beaufort Dam. There's a beautiful river below Atlanta, LaGrange, Noonan, Columbus. There needs to be enough water and flow there as well. So the sharing pain vision is really critical. The second thing, we need to have a clear understanding, I think, of the future water needs. Currently, we're operating off of 2000 census data for future water projections and demand for Metro Atlanta that don't even consider the recession, don't consider the exceptional drought, or the good job of conservation that we've moved on. Let's know where we're going. We feel what we've got right now is a pretty gross exaggeration for water demand in the future. Third, we're about to see local governments coming forward with a good assessment of leaks in the systems. Finally, we're going to get a grip on that, and it looks like it will be on average a gallon for every 5 gallons pulled out of the river or the lake is leaks into the ground. Well, no business would operate that way. So we would love to see the GFA, Georgia Environmental Facilities Authority, or whatever their new name is, come up with some great funding mechanisms to help local governments. And finally, on water quality, it's not just about wastewater assimilation, it's about having in-stream flows. If you don't have enough water in the system for a healthy ecosystem now and 100 years from now, we're not going to, I don't think, get where we need to be. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Rooks, what are we doing wrong? What's the crisis case that you're going to fix?
That's an interesting way to look at it. I'd rather look at what we're doing right.
Well, we just did.
Okay. What we're doing wrong is a very broad question, and you could dig into, explore that in lots of different ways. One of the things I think we are, in the past, have not done wrong is to create a forum whereby we all understand the needs of each other and understand how we're all interconnected to each other. There was discussion earlier about the groundwater surface water connection. That is a huge part of our sustainable water management plan, to try to understand that better, because these systems are not independent of each other and very tightly connected to each other. The agricultural use, which sort of gets to be the, it used to be from the south of Atlanta. Atlanta was a bad boy, and now Atlanta, the south of Atlanta, is a bad boy. So we got to get away from that kind of dialogue. So that's a big part of the wrong that we've been doing in the past. And we got to get to the point where we understand there is a belief that everybody's got to give up something eventually. But that doesn't mean we lower our quality of life. I think what it means is that we've got to look at where are the investments needed to be the most productive. One of the things we're doing in the Sustainable Water Management Plan is to try to understand the pinch points or the choke points in the system. Where are the opportunities to make investments that will have the most return for the dollar for the entire ACF basin? Is it in wastewater treatment plants, or is it in better irrigation? Some of our members are very actively involved in more efficient irrigation systems for agriculture. And the dialogue is now beginning to move to the level of where people are talking about not what other people are doing wrong, but what can we do as individuals and as organizations to do a better job of managing this limited resource that we have.
Mr. Rooks, let me ask you the reservoir question we asked the first panel. You have got some firm thoughts on that, I think. Where's the best place if we have to build one?
Well, that's good. Thank you. That's a good setup. Being a Lake Lanier Association representative, we think the best place is to utilize existing reservoirs more efficiently. By increasing Lanier 2 feet, you generate 26 billion gallons of more stored water.
But does that mean building Buford Dam 2 feet higher, essentially?
No. You leave the dam where it is. It's not a construction issue. It's just a matter of raising the full pool level from the Corps of Engineers. So
everybody got that? This room is up to date on this stuff, right? Okay, good. Excuse me.
Yeah, that same approach could be used for other reservoirs. We fundamentally believe that every project has to stand on its own merits, and it's not a matter of trading off one versus the other. If you look at reservoirs, each of them has to stand on its own merits in terms of cost, benefits, and the results that it would produce to the total water system and to the total water resources in the environment.
Okay. Okay, Mr. Kerr, what can we do better?
Talk to each other. And I mean that sincerely. For 6.5 years, I had the distinct pleasure to be the spokesman negotiator on behalf of the state of Georgia in the discussions with Alabama and Florida. And we spent a great deal of time talking at each other. Unfortunately, the needs or wishes that each of us had caused us to not, plus the fact that we had to do all our negotiations in front of a group like this instead of quietly where we could talk about, if we did this, would you be willing to do that? We never had those kind of conversations. So I think it's important, as has been pointed out, that we do talk. But we also have to go in there with a clear understanding of what we need and what they need. When we did our modeling, we had the top 4 items in looking at priorities was first, ecological. How much water had to go downstream to protect species. A lot of people do not believe that, but that was the first item on our list. Second one was water quality. We have to have a certain amount of water passing the gauges in order to assimilate the waste that was coming out of the system. The third priority was people. How much water, drinking water supply, and the fourth was agriculture. So we attempted to balance those needs in our negotiations with the state of Florida and the state of Alabama. And as has been pointed out, the depletion of the water supply from Metro Atlanta when it hit Florida was relatively small. Lake Lanier only captures, if I remember my numbers right, 5.6% of the basin. The water's in 5.6% of the basin. What else can we do right? Well, I think some good things have come out of these negotiations, these discussions. The fact that agriculture now does monitor and now reports. But I think that we have to look, again, I'll repeat this, at what is the ability of the finite systems that we're looking at to provide drinking water and meet these other needs. And I don't think that conversation's been held in as much depth as it needs to be held. The potential for us to come out of this intact, I think, is pretty great. Certainly the attorneys that have labored hard for the local governments and the state have done a magnificent job at presenting our legal standing. One of the things we will have to look at, and this is going to rankle a number of people, is interbasin transfers. As much as I hate the thought of transferring water from one basin to another and the potential for some ecological disruption of that, I think we can deal with that. We're going to have to take water from Savannah at some point. We're going to have to take water from Tennessee at some point and from others in order to meet the growth beyond about 2050.
Thank you. Thank you. We are getting lots of good questions, and we are looking at the clock because we are hoping we'll do more of these. And I think one of the best ways we can plan to do more of these is to begin when we say we're going to and end when we say we're going to. So let me get a couple more questions, and this perfect one is for you, Mr. Thomas, because it's about data. Many metro Atlanta areas, here we go, hang on. Most metro Atlanta areas, organizations use enterprise asset management systems. What are the next steps for those systems to meet the sustainable needs, and where's the cost of this going to come from? That's sort of the stick of the question.
Good question. Again, let's see, first, a couple of points. First, managing the water resources, it requires a collaboration from your academia as well as your technology partners, and then as well as your private and public sector groups. One of the things about the asset management approach is that the more data you have is not always the best thing. It's the best way when you can analyze that data and then make decisions based upon that.
Right.
So one of the things we want to look at for the city is actually having more integrated solutions. Okay, the more information that we get from these various information systems that we can put up into a dashboard, that, like I said, we can start visually enhancing everything, because, like I say, a picture is worth 1,000 words. So one of the next steps I would think that we would do is to take a look at how we can use more data, but within the system that we currently have, finding the revenue to do that still goes back to some of the things that we're doing now. Right now we implemented a recycling program within the city of Atlanta when we were flushing our fire hydrants a couple of years or so ago. But one of the things is the water, when we were flushing the hydrant, due to the water quality, when we were flushing that, we were not capturing that water. That water was going off down into the street. And so one of the things that we did was actually look at doing a cost-benefit analysis of maybe capturing that water using some tanker cars or some things like that, and being able to recycle that within the city of Atlanta for your parks. Like I know I'm thinking about John A. White Park. So if I could take the water that I was pushing off right now, flushing down the system, if I could take that water, recapture that, I could go down to John A. White Park, and then I could have my greens have the best greens in the city of Atlanta, which then again, you have more people who are coming there into your city to spend more money to play golf on your parks.
Right. Park Pride has been very helpful with that, as well as the Olmsted Linear Park along Ponce de Leon was a great beneficiary of some of that City of Atlanta fire hydrant water.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
So in terms of tracking, other things we have within our collection system, we want to look at our unaccounted for water. When we're talking about the various lakes that we have, and then we want to make sure that we have capturing all of the revenue that we can from the use of the meters that we have there currently in the system right now. I know we did start a large meter testing, repair and replacement program some time ago, and at the time we have 60% of really 60 to 70% of the revenue associated from the City of Atlanta Water comes from just maybe 1,500 or so customers. So we want to make sure that we have accurate systems that are metering things properly. Maybe we're going to more towards smart metering again. And then we're also able to use smart metering to look into whether or not we have various leaks within the system, be from a residential standpoint or then again from a commercial standpoint as well.
Okay. Several of the questions deal with why we don't know more about this and what's the role of the media in helping tell us about this. And I am not speaking for the media, but I will point out that today's Atlanta Journal-Constitution has Mayor Reed speaking highly of the role of the media in helping make sure the water remetering in Atlanta was going well and was being fairly reported. I thought that might be a headline right there. So stay on my advice as a PR person is stay on your local media, get on Twitter, get on Facebook, tell folks about leaks and remind them that this is an urgent issue for you if in fact it is, because that's the way the media works, as most of you know. Question from Ms. Bethea, what makes you think local governments will soon be reporting leaks?
Because a state law was passed in 2010 requiring every local government to use the same methodology, a nationally approved methodology to come up with their leakage. That data was submitted to the state on March the 1st, and EPD is supposed to put it on their website sometime soon, I hope. So I think the first step is to know, to have a level playing field, to see where the problems are, the degree of the problem, and then begin looking for ways to make improvements. And it will take the state, I think, with some mandates perhaps, and certainly some investments to help local governments deal with their leaks. Not surprisingly, I'm sure, I don't know all the numbers yet, although I've had a little bit of a preview. City of Atlanta, I think, is going to come in a little high, but we've got that $2 billion as part of Atlanta Clean Water, hopefully to help fix the leaks.
Great. Question for Mr. Kerr. How has the previous uncontrolled growth in the suburbs, the questioner's words, not mine, affected regional water consumption problems, and how do you anticipate an economic rebound affecting growth in the suburbs?
I'm not sure I have the answer to that question, but I'll take a shot at it. I think one of the things that happened in the suburbs is we put in more septic systems when the population increased. And with septic systems, we look at it from a standpoint of that's 100% consumption. Whereas with a city water system, we look at it as potentially 30, 35% consumption, meaning how much gets back into the stream or to the system. Obviously, any water, whether it's reused water, whether it's septic tanks or whatever, eventually get into the cycle. Whether they go directly to the stream that they came out of or not is another story. How will the economic rebound? Well, I think there's a lot of factors that are going to affect the suburbs. One, I think that transportation, getting to work, all of those things are going to have an effect on how many people are willing to pay $4 a gallon to come to town. which I think there will be an increase. As long as we have population increase, there will be an increase in suburbs. But I think there will be more infill building in the city. There's a huge number of lots, empty lots in the city of Atlanta. And I think a lot of that will begin to fill up. And I think the neighborhoods, when they get their community spirits together, will begin to do things like the South Fork Conservancy type of thing. And I think conservation, although I do have some thoughts on conservation that Sally's heard before, but I do think that conservation is absolutely critical. We just have to be sure what we're going to do with the water that we save. Are we going to have more people? Or are we going to send it downstream, use it for other purposes? Those are the kinds of questions we have to deal with as population increases.
Well, for the moment, we'll let Mr. Rooks have the last word. Green infrastructure. We haven't heard that yet. How do we get it, and how do we make it sustainable?
Well, whether it's green infrastructure or any of these ideas, it eventually comes down to dollars and investments that have to be made. And I think we need to think outside the box a little bit, to use an overused phrase. Does it make sense for, arbitrarily say, the North Georgia area to invest in some resource in South Georgia because it benefits North Georgia in the long run, and vice versa? So I think we need to look at this whole question of investments for green infrastructure, whether it be lessening the impact of power supply generation by using water for cooling, whether it be for returning reuse water. There's a whole range of issues that need to be looked at, but they all essentially come down to dollars. Who's going to make the investment? How it's going to be paid for? I think we all know that eventually we all pay for it one way or the other. The question is, what's the methodology of our paying for it? The most vote on Tuesday was a good example of that. And I think those kinds of realities of saying, well, who are the beneficiaries of an investment, and how can they participate in the investment to achieve the benefits of that investment, needs to be on the table and looked at more aggressively.
Thank you. Any other final word anybody'd like from here? We've got a handful of questions that haven't gotten answered, and I'm told from the Civic League that these will be on the website with answers. Am I getting that correct? And the Atlanta Regional Commission has got lots of information on some of these very same issues. Next week is Fix a Leak Week. And there's info at the Water District and on the ARC websites for that. Any last word before we go? Because you have just done a great job, and we're getting out of here remotely on time, but I haven't noticed anybody getting up to leave. Thank you, panel. Appreciate it.